It's coming in there.
Here we are.
It's so weird because I watch you all on one screen and 45 seconds of the past on the other screen. It's so weird. It's the weirdest thing. All right, there it is live. We're up on YouTube. Ta-da! Another exciting Sunday morning.
Yet again.
Look at us all. Gonna turn off the sound. Otherwise, I'm 45 seconds behind in speech too.
Ooh, that's alarming.
It's quite the discipline to do all that. Oh, good. All right. Well, we're just a couple minutes before the start of the hour, so we'll just give it that time. For those of you joining us, glad you're here. I've got a bunch of authors going to talk about their journey a little bit. We'll talk about the journey for publishing. I'm going to pull up that screen here in just a moment. Maybe. Come on. There it is. Okay. Is my, are we seeing PowerPoint there? Panel? All right, perfect.
Yes.
Thanks. I won't know for 45 seconds if we're seeing it on YouTube or not. I have to wait and hold on that. All right. Did I get the guesses right? Did I get everyone who was on this? Yeah, I wasn't sure who was going to join us this morning. So I know things were fluid on this. So terrific. I'm waiting for Kelsey to pop in to do the moderating in the other room, so she can control the crowds, the swarms of people.
Beat them back. Back.
That's right. Line them up in a row. All right. Just a moment. All right, we're going to do another picture of the screen. You ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Good. All right, it's coming up on 10 o'clock, folks. You are with the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group during our live streams from the virtual exhibit hall in the virtual 2021 Tucson Festival of Books. I'm delighted to be with you again and with this panel of people, all of whom are on their repeat performance of being on the virtual. So, round of applause for all of you for showing up again to be part of our presentation here. If you have questions or thoughts and you're watching us on YouTube and you're watching us live, which is on Sunday, March 7th, if you're watching that, you can put your thoughts and your questions in the box over there. And then Kelsey will also help to be sure that we get all your questions answered as well. She's moderating that. As always, I'm grateful to not only the whole team that you're going to be speaking to today and see them live on the screen, but also the people in the background like Michelle and Kieran and Kelsey who keep things running and keep things moving. So thank you all for that. Today, we're going to talk about your publishing journey. What has that been like? So I'm going to give you a little background as a publisher, and then I'm going to ask the panel to just kind of talk about, what they're about, what their journey has been about, what surprised them, for example. I know that many people who will watch this in the future will be people that are like thinking about getting a book out, and they have usually an idealized idea of how publishing works. Before we do that, though, let's talk a little bit about what's already happened here. We've had 4 live streams, which you can find all on YouTube right now. So smalltoothdog.com/YouTube, the place where you are right now. We've done a couple of interviews with authors and illustrators. We've talked about how oral storytelling can transform your writing, which really turned into a fascinating conversation. We had a Kidlit panel where we talked about Kidlit and children's books. And then last night, Mark and I kind of had a casual kind of coffee table conversation about getting your books published. So that's then. Today, we're moving over to this very first panel. What have you learned on your publishing journey? And at noon, I'll have more of a reflection about research and what you should do before you write your first book. Before you put that book on paper, a lot of people write the book and then try to find an audience for it, when actually it should be the other way around. So we'll talk about that casually at noon. And at 3 o'clock, we'll talk briefly about some of the things that are coming up from Small Tooth Dog, including a couple of you don't often get to see test pictures. So we'll show you some stuff, some art that's in progress. So I'm looking forward to sharing that as well. So I'd like to welcome my panel, and I'm going to ask them before I dive into this, if you as a panel would just take a couple of moments to introduce yourselves, and we'll do it in the order that I have it on the screen. So Harriet Cole, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Harriet Cole, and I have my first book out with Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group very recently. It's 15 Pounds of Muscle and Bounce, a collection of, as Sean says, somewhat weird Norse folktales. And I am finding this whole Tucson Festival of Books online thing a very interesting and informative experience. And Sean is waving my book around for me. Thank you, Sean. I have mine just out of reach. I could knock my coffee over getting to it.
No problem. Very good. All right. Next on my screen is Laura Packer. And Laura, look, I found the gold seals for your book finally.
Thank you.
Like, I know I had them here somewhere, but I found them. So anyway, Laura Packer, you're next. Go ahead.
So my name is Laura Packer. I live near Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am a storyteller with about 30 years of experience, and I have self-published books in the past, but the first books that I've worked with a publisher on are From Audience to Zeal, the ABCs of Finding, Crafting, and Telling a Great Story, and its accompanying workbook, both of which won awards from Storytelling World in 2020. And I'm really happy to be here.
Very good. Thank you. I'm glad to put that out. And I know Laura has an odd scheduling thing today, so if Laura has to disappear, thanks for being here, and we're glad you can do what you want, but if you've got to bail, you got to bail, so no problem. Mr. Mark, you are next, sir.
Yeah, I'm Marc Severson. I started out as an archaeologist, went into teaching, became an educator, taught elementary school for over 30 years, and then I finally got around to doing what I intended to do from the beginning and write books. So now I'm an author.
Absolutely. And the book that Mark had put out with us is Don't Throw Me in the Cholla Patch, which is in the Wood Rat series. And Mark will be back at 3 o'clock to talk about the next book in this series as well. And last but not least, of course, is Amanda Malek-Ahmadi. Amanda, go ahead.
I'm Malek-Ahmadi, and I'm an Arizona native. I am a dancer, a dance teacher, a former elementary education teacher, and I am a mom of 4. And then I am the author of what Sean is holding up and what's back here, 10 Ballet Dancers.
Very nice. And doing some school shows recently with that book too?
I did. I had some virtual story times on Friday to round out a Read Across America week during the school week. It was amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm Sean Buvala, and I'm the publisher of the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group. I've been teaching and working on the road since, it's like something like 35 years now. The very first book I ever put out was Daddy Teller, which I will tell you about in just a moment. And then the most recent book that we've put out from with my title on there is this one, which is The Moon Was Not Happy, which is a folktale, original folktale, fairy tale, kind of a pourquoi style tale that I had been telling for at least a dozen years, if not more, before we put the book out. So glad to have you all with us today. I want to take a moment, and Mark, I think we're getting some feedback from you. I think we might need to mute you for just a moment on that. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the first book that I put out, and the expectations that any of us have when we publish a book. Someone had called me, a coach that I was working with, and after a long series of conversations, he finally said to me, when are you going to get your book out? When are you going to publish your book? Which to me was a question that came out of the blue because we had not been talking about books. And so back when this book was put together, which was originally started in 2007, but published in 2009, the ability to produce a book was in its fledgling states of self-publishing. We were in just the very beginnings of that being an actual reality. And there really was only one company out there to be able to produce a book as a self-published author, and that was Lulu at the time. Really the only company to do that didn't require offset printing and having 5,000 copies in your garage. So when I wrote Daddy Teller, we wrote it to a very specific audience. If you go back to some of the other virtuals we've been doing this weekend, there's much more in there. But I want to tell you about the first time somebody had my book in their hands that wasn't a family member. So I was doing this meeting with a couple of women from a government organization, and they agreed to see me for lunch to talk about communication skills or whatever it was that we were talking about at the time. And they were doing somebody else a favor. They were like, they said, you should meet with this guy. And so they agreed because they owed somebody a favor, right? That kind of meeting. So when we got there, it was polite, and we all sat down for lunch, and they were very nice. They were listening, you know, as we talked. But for each of them, I gave them a packet of information about the subject that we were there for. And on top of that packet of information, I put a copy of the Daddy Teller book. Not because it had anything to do with why we were there, but I was a newly published author. And so I needed to give somebody my book. So I put the book on the stack and left it on top of that. And then as we're talking, one of the women, again, they're listening, right? As we're talking, one of the women looks over to the stack of books, a stack of material that I'd left for them. And they see the Daddy Teller book on the top. And so she stops and she picks up the book and she says, oh, and she strokes the cover of the book. And she says, oh, you're an author. And in that moment, I went from this guy they were doing a favor with to, oh, you're an author. Now, look, I didn't write the book for that ego stroke like that. That's not why I wrote it. I wrote it as a service. But in that moment, I realized how powerful it is to be an author. Not with something we ran off on a Xerox machine and put in a binder, but to have a book that was a real book that could be touched and felt. And when you picked it up, you went, oh, this is a book. This isn't self-publishing. This is a book, right? Even though it's completely self-published at the time. The Small Tooth Dog as a company did not exist at that time. So that was the first time I kind of went, oh, you know, this thing about having a book is very, very powerful. Written a lot of books since then, but that very first moment when somebody who wasn't family acknowledged the book that I had put together. So I want to give you just a little slight background, a piece from another workshop that we do. And we talk about what were the dreams of being an author. And for many people, what are the dreams of being the author? For folks who are brand new to it and haven't done a lot of exploration yet, a lot of times their dream of the author is they're going to be an author. They're going to ride upon the mighty Kraken and conquer the seas in the world because they have a book and they have taken words and they have put those words in order, and those words have been placed in order, and now everyone will flock to what they have produced, and everyone will want to read their book. And because their book will be so very fantastic, they will get to retreat to their walled garden, eat bonbons, wait for royalty checks. You know, because royalty checks come so fast, they will wait for royalty checks and eat bonbons and write their next book, and they will be an author. That's a dream. It's really doesn't work that way, though. So what really has happened in books when you get past the dramatic part? What really happens in books? Well, the truth is, in the old days, an author would have to work away pretty much in obscurity, hoping to get a book deal, because there were only a few high-level gatekeeping things that would keep them away from having a book published. Very few authors got published. Very few people actually had a book come out. The barriers to entry were very high. There were very few people that could take your book. There were expensive agents to be connected with. You couldn't reach people like you can now. And oftentimes authors would turn their book over, their manuscript over to what possibly could be very predatory. Turn that book over, and maybe a year later, somebody produces a book and sends them a carton of their book that they haven't seen up until that point. And the publisher, though, was the only person who could promote that book to equally guarded media. The only people that could reach the media back in the day were people who had high-powered publicists to do that, because there were only so many newspapers. There was only so much radio. There was very limited television. So the ability to reach that required really high-level guarded stuff. So what's the reality now? The reality now is that it's easier to get a book published. Anyone can publish a book, okay? But it's harder to make money at it. much harder to make money with a book. A book, we think, needs to be a tool to help authors reach out with what their message is. The truth is authors are responsible for selling their books. Now, as a publisher, every book that we run through, goes through certain amounts of stuff, and every person who is on this list, I've spent thousands of dollars promoting their book. We do promotions because every one of these people has a book published with us. So we've spent lots of money on their stuff, and I still produce things for that. But ultimately, it comes down to the authors having a platform to be able to do that. Right now, the balancing act is between really good creation and really good promotion. And that oftentimes falls to the author to be able to do that. So that's just kind of a look at where I think publishing is right now. And having said all of those things, I want to open the floor up to anyone else who's on the panel. I will get rid of this share so we can see people's faces. Hello, faces of people. And I'm just curious, and every one of you is an experienced speaker about this kind of subject. So I'm just going to throw the floor open for a moment. And I'm just curious what your journey's been like. What do you think people need to know about publishing? I'm going to suggest maybe Laura first, because I know your schedule's weird today.
Thank you, Sean. So I had self-published prior to working with you. And those books, quite frankly, I thought of as calling cards. They were a way to give myself some Veritas. But even with self-publishing becoming more accessible, there still is some stigma associated with self-publishing, which I think is unfortunate. But what
Laura, I'm sorry, I need to stop you just for a moment. Can I get the rest of the panel to turn their microphones off? Because we're getting really weird feedback.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Okay. Laura, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Test, test, test. Better? Excellent. What I found in working with you was that it did become a journey instead of agony. I found self-publishing very difficult because I am not a graphic designer. And while there are great design programs available and this, that, and the other, it was hard. But what I discovered in working with you was that it could become a collaborative process that felt much more organic to me in many ways. And certainly we had our go-arounds about things, but at no point did I feel like I was being shut down. So the old process that you describe is very much not the model that you work on, which I really appreciate. What I also found interesting about it, and one of the things that I've really learned and is an ongoing journey for me, is that there are two pieces of work involved with having a book for me. One is the ongoing marketing. And it's constant. I have to be promoting the book myself, because if I don't, it will rightly fall into obscurity. It's a good book, but the way the world is so loud now that if you don't make some noise, you could be the best writer on the planet and your book may not get heard. Which then led to, that meant that I had to get over some of my personal hurdles about discomfort with promotion and marketing. So it has been a journey for me with that. And it is an ongoing learning experience. The other thing that I've learned is something you referenced in your story, which is I've been doing this work for a long time and I'm very good at what I do. And I do a broad range of things. I'm not everything for everyone, but I'm a teller and I'm a coach and I'm a consultant and so on. But once I had the book, people started taking me seriously who had never been willing to give me the time of day before. And it's not that they were unkind or cruel, but until the pandemic, when we all started using Zoom or other forms of video communication all the time, my impact was limited to who I could reach in person. The book made it possible for me to reach many more people than I would have been able to just by doing my work and being good at it. It doesn't matter how good I am. If you don't know I exist, then you're not going to hire me if you've never heard of me. But if you see that I have a book that was a bestseller on Amazon for a little while in its category, that has won some awards, all of a sudden, then I become legitimate in ways that I was not otherwise. But that doesn't mean I can slack on the promotion or the other things. So I don't know that I'd call it a journey so much as I would call it an ongoing labyrinth that I'm walking. I'm walking this pattern and I need to be intentional about each footstep, and the pattern repeats itself, but each time I learn something new. So I hope that's useful to you, Sean.
It is. One of the things that your comments, we tell people, especially people who are producing a book like yours, which is more this isn't a picture book, right? So several people on the rest of the people on here have produced books that require art and things like that, which is really expensive to do. Quality must be done. These are great books that the other people have put out, but your book didn't require a lot of art. And so one of the things I tell people that produce nonfiction works like yours is, as soon as the first book is done, you have to start on the second.
Yes.
You need to start getting the next one done. So what we've done with you is, not only did we do the first book, the Audience to Zeal book, but we did the workbook almost immediately. And then you're already, yes, there's the, yeah, and that's the really nice spiral bound one.
Yep.
And you're already working on the next release that we've already talked about, and that we agree in principle that we're producing. And how important it is to get that second book going, because the energy, no matter how good your book is, the energy fades from it.
And the momentum is vital. You need to have this momentum for being known as someone who's producing high quality content that looks and feels good. So then the marketing for each subsequent book in some ways becomes easier, because you're building on something that already exists.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That you're able to produce, people are able to say, oh, can I get the other books from you? It's great to get to the point, like I've got a number of books out, and sometimes I have to really stop and think and go, okay, what's the list of my books? Because I don't remember them all. And to be able to say to people, and to put, like at live events, put like a stack of books and say, this is the Sean package. We did that a couple of years ago. You and me together had a package of books that were, wrapped up and sealed, and here's the package. So really powerful stuff to be able to do that. So
and for my non-performing work, so my teaching, my coaching, facilitating, the consulting work I do, especially being able to package these two books together and say, hire me and you'll get this package of the book and the workbook, which will teach you so much more. So being able to do a package is really, really valuable.
Right. And the value that books bring to producing contracts, it's not always about selling this book. It's about what the book becomes. You can say to people, when you hire me, I'll throw in, these extra books. It's not about, do you make $14.95 a book or whatever the number is, right?
Plus, it feels really good. It feels really good to be able to include that and to have people use your book and find it useful.
And the quality of your book is very good. So it's not just like, oh, here's a pamphlet.
Right.
It's a book. It's a book that editing was a task, and not because of your writing, but because we were trying to get the sound right. We're trying to get that sound right. So yeah, it's a work that we really produced on. Good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that input. So again, just opening the floor to the rest of you now. You want to talk about where you've been with this book, or calls it a labyrinth, a journey, whatever, where are you at? So open floor. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Well, when you were discussing your process that you went through from the beginning, when you self-published and so forth, I was thinking back over where I had been with this whole thing. And I started out, I dominated my high school literary books that they put out each year, and people kept telling me, oh, you're a good writer, you should write, should become an author, whatever. I said, oh, that sounds good. I think I'll do that. Become an author. I remember my first foray, I started out very realistically as a poet. And I had 2 poems accepted. I think it was my second year in college. I had 2 poems accepted for something. And I waited patiently, and I never saw the copies I was supposed to get. And I don't know if they ever came out even. I've never seen anything that tells me that, yes, they were published, and going down the road, there are submissions here, there, everywhere, stories, what have you. And finally, a few years later, I got a chapbook accepted by a publisher, chapbook of poetry accepted, and I was really excited about that. And then they went under before it was published. And I keep telling people that I wasn't responsible for that. It wasn't that they accepted my book that they went under. That was my last foray into poetry. I haven't done anything on that since, but continued to write stories and send them out and so forth. And then when finally, after talking to S.T. Joshi, who was the Lovecraft specialist around today, and I had a book about that was kind of Lovecraft based, very narrow in its own way, because it deals with horror fantasy set in the Old West, which is really a small genre out there, But it was what I enjoyed writing it, and that was the first one I self-published. And when I finally held that in my hand and looked at it, and could just say, it's a book. It's a book. Here it is. That was very very empowering. It didn't matter to me that how many were sold or how many people bought or what have you. It was a book, and so that's been the exciting part, I guess, over the 50 years I've been doing this. I don't know.
Yeah. There's that moment where you like, that thing about it's a book, that I've heard that from several authors, not only in our organization, but from others too, that it's just not possible that there's a book in their hands and it has their name on it. So cool. So very cool. Good. Thanks for that, Mark. Before we go to the other two people, we have a question in the chat box, Laura. The question in the chat box is from Phyllis. What is Audience to Zeal about?
Thank you for asking. I'm so sorry I didn't say that. So Audience to Zeal is a collection of many short essays on a variety of topics that initially were about oral storytelling. However, what I've discovered is that these essays apply to writers, to speakers, to people who are thinking about how to organize how they present information. So it's a selection of, 80, 90, something like that, short essays on topics. Here, I'll show you the table of contents. Topics that start with about, so understanding what your story is about, going all the way to approaching your work with zeal. But it also includes things like, how do you fracture stories? What are the ethics of storytelling? How do you craft an effective beginning? What happens if you get jealous of other storytellers? So it's a whole bunch of short essays to get people started on thinking about what these things mean to them, with a whole bunch of tips about how to enact the principles I talk about. I'm really proud of this book. It started out of a blog project because I was writing a lot about storytelling. And then in conversations with various friends and students of mine, I realized that I had a book, that this could really be an effective and worthwhile book. So I had about 50% of the material when I started and had to edit all of that material and then write about 50% more. And it is my hope that this book helps anybody who's interested in learning how to share stories, how to be a clearer communicator, and how to understand their own life through narrative and through insightful, thoughtful process.
Good.
Was that a good blurb for you? Was that an okay answer, Sean?
That's a great answer. Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate that. And Phyllis, thanks for answering the question. If anyone else is watching who has a question, please go ahead and put it in the box and we'll get to it. I'll get to it. Kelsey will get to it. We will get to your question as well. So I want to go back to our subject matter some more. So I've got Harriet and Amanda still would like some input from you. Harriet, I think you were going to run next anyway.
Yeah,
So
I think I've managed to unmute, I believe. Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually was listening to your history of publishing with great interest because I went approximately 10 rounds with the old style of trying to get published in the 90s and left rather battered. Now, I got to admit, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about crafting stories. I was working on a piece of historical fiction set in Dark Ages Britain. I mean, and the research part was just, if I could have spent my whole life looking things up about how it worked and comparing the ways different people looked at these cultures, I would have been just happy as all get out. But, I had to justify it with a book. and I went to writers' conferences and I went to workshops and I met a lot of really neat people and I learned a lot, but and I kept getting like to the second step of an agent. I'd send out the query and the sample, and they'd say, we'd like to see the manuscript, and I'd list, and I'd, send out the whole darn thing, and it would come back, sorry, it's really good, you're a good writer, but we just can't use this. And so on one day, like being struck by a bolt of lightning, I said, this isn't working. And I wasn't quite sure what to do next. So I went to the Mesa Storytelling Festival, which was the first one that was in Mesa. And I met oral storytelling face to face. And at that point, I totally let go of the idea of ever writing a book. I mean, I was just so in love with the idea that you could stand up and tell a story. And because of what I'd learned, I was a quick starter in learning how to craft and tell stories. And I had all kinds of fun. And then this guy showed up, actually as visiting the classrooms in South Mountain Community College Storytelling Institute, and he kept talking about books. And I at first I was deeply suspicious. For one thing, I had completely internalized the wisdom of the 90s that anything other than the traditional route was just not. You'd end up selling books out of the trunk of your car, and what kind of life was like that. But so I came into doing this way with a certain amount of suspicion, and it took me a while, and finding the right stuff that I really could do well to make it work out. And from the point where I've said, okay, I really am going to publish a book with Small Tooth Dog, it was like, okay, this is really, really different and much more collaborative, and much less a sense that I was throwing large manuscripts into a dark hole and they were never reemerging. So that's coming through it from the traditional side and deciding that I was right to back out of it.
And I know that your book, because of the nature of the stories, we had to do a lot of back and forth and really, really do a lot of work on how do we edit these. You had this beautiful base material to work with, and then I'd say, fix this and fix that. And then my editing team would get it, and we'd kind of do this balance about how do we stay true to the old stories, but yet still produce a book that's culturally relevant now. Little things about the dance story took a long time. Angry Niece is No Joke. That took a long time to really get that feel right. So yeah, it was quite an experience for that. Really very interesting. Good, thank you. Appreciate that. Amanda, kind of come in here with some of that same stuff. Where have you been? Let's just kind of hear from your journey.
Good. So just like Harriet, I went, and just, it sounds like Mark and Laura, I went the traditional route first, trying to query and those sort of things. And some recommendations I have for you starting out is get a critique group, get that group behind you, because you don't want to just be showing your book to your family, because they might just be like, oh yes, it's great, but they don't really know about the writing process and that sort of thing. And they just might be telling you what you want to hear, or they just might think it's great because they're not quite sure.
Right.
So I had joined Storyteller Academy, which gave me a lot of great coursework and taught me how to create books like these, which they call the dummy. I prefer to call it the mock-up. And the other thing I did was on Facebook, I got a rally group behind me. I just created a private group called Journey to Publication. And so that was great to have those friends there, just kind of being my cheerleaders, and I would let them know what was going on, things that you can't talk about too publicly, and be like, I sent this manuscript out, and they'd, cheer me on, because it's such a roller coaster ride. And when you go ahead and try to start this publishing journey, you've got to decide, do you want to stay on that roller coaster? Because it can be a rough ride sometimes, because you put your heart out there when you're sending off those manuscripts. You press send. I would count to like 3. And one time my husband's like, just press the button. And, you do. And then it's just out there, and it's this waiting game. And then you get that back, that information from the agent, or sometimes through what's called the Society of Children's Books Writers and Illustrators. You get the opportunity to go ahead and submit to editors, and you get it back. And then it was great, but it doesn't quite fit what we're looking for, sort of thing. So it's crushing, but you have to remember, it's not, you're writing, they said it's great. It's just that they have such a small little spot that they can take on new work and things like that. And one of my journeys, I had submitted one, And she goes, you know what? I actually represent a book that's very similar, but sometimes you're just not sure with an agent what they've agented. So that was interesting, but she had still asked for other work. And so I'd sent it, but then it just didn't work out. But here I am today with what I have. And that's thanks to the SCBWI. It's a really great organization, so many wonderful tools and conferences. And then here regionally in Arizona, we meet up, and it was at the meetup that I learned about the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group. And had I not been there that day, and had I not shared my story that day, I may not have found out about the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group. And so I'm so glad that I did. And then Sean, like some things that have surprised me since coming out with my book is my children aren't all that impressed. That was when that news, they were with the book. They were like excited and that sort of thing. And it's great where they were like, it's mommy in the back of the cover. But recently I was in a newspaper article, and I took a moment and shared that with each of my children and recorded it. And my two in the middle, my third one, he's a book sniffer, which I love sniffing books too. And he just sniffs the newspaper and goes, "It smells like Chick-fil-A." Nothing about, "Look, it's mommy," or anything like that. It was just, the newspaper smells like Chick-fil-A. I'm like, okay, that was very humbling that those two children were just like, it's mom on another piece of paper. So that was just too funny with that. That has definitely been a surprise there. And then what's something that's been wonderful is, since my book's written about dance and I am a dancer, is I've had some dance teachers look at it that were my dance teachers. And one of them wrote me the most beautiful text. And then she talked about, the way she felt of me as a dancer as a child, that she would have never expressed that to me, and she had never had. And I was just like, oh, that's just so beautiful to hear. And then just when I posted about my virtual story times recently, Suzanne Nosp, she wrote, "I bought your book. It's beautiful." And she was the, what did she do for us? The counting and rhythm classes she did for us at the U of A. And so that was just really great to hear that she had enjoyed the book and stuff. So someone that's in the profession, and there she was giving me that compliment. So that just meant the world too. So it's beautiful. It's a beautiful roller coaster, this journey publishing.
Yeah, it's definitely, all of you have referenced some version of ups and downs and roller coasters, and that's very, very true. I think the next question I have for you, we're gonna bounce around on this one. Laura, I'm gonna let you go first, because I know you've got to run. What's your fastest advice to someone who's like, I want to get a book published just like you. What should I do? What's your top of the head? What's your top of the head? This is what you should be doing stuff. So Laura, I'm going to let you say that. And also, I know you got to run too.
Yep. I just wanted to say thank you, everybody. It's lovely to see you. Sean, if anybody has any questions specifically for me that come up in the chat, please send them to me and I will answer them.
Yeah.
And as far as advice to a new author, get cracking. If you have a story inside of you, or something or information that is you're driven to share, find a way to do it. Contact a publisher, start figuring out what you need to do next, start working on your social media presence, get writing, talk to people, and know that what you feel like you need to share, somebody needs to read. And on that, I'm going to head out. Lovely to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Appreciate your time. All right, good. I know for me, and I'll open this up to one of the things that for me, my advice to new authors is always grow a thick skin. People get very precious about their work. And sometimes, as you say, with family can be not good, but also sometimes in groups, people get very precious about their other members too. So there's also a thing you got to get used to there too. You got to be really careful. Thick skin is necessary, because as a publisher, there's things that I have to say to you, be that I know about the book industry that you as an author may not know, because you've lived and loved and been so connected to this work for a while. And sometimes it's hard to be able to say, I really like what you're doing, and we could look at it, but you're going to have to fix these things. And people are like, well, yeah, but it's my book. I was like, well, I can't publish it because it's not ready. Art is like that. I know that people will come to me as a publisher with art already in mind that their friend did. And I get to say this art is not usable. And sometimes the person has already made the commitment to their friend that they're going to use their friend's art in their book, and it's awful. Now, that doesn't mean that the artist is a bad person. It means that their art is not ready for publishing. Their art's not ready. That person needs a lot more training. So growing a thick skin is really important. Don't come to a publisher with art ready if you're doing a children's book, because that's not your job. You know, that thick skin, man. People, there's times I have to turn people down who would make a terrific book, but it's not in our charism, not in our type of thing. So thick skin is really, really important. So that would be one of mine. So open floor to the rest of you. What's that first thing you would tell an author?
Well, one thing that occurred to me back when Laura was talking and such as, before I started this last journey that I'm on right now, actually putting out books, last couple of years that I was a teacher, I hooked up with a local newspaper that had gone online completely, the Tucson Citizen, and I wrote blogs for them. I wrote an education blog and an archaeology blog. And I had to put out, I set myself a goal of what I had to put out, how much I had to put out, how much I had to, how many words I had to write, and what it had to look like. And of course I had to edit it all and get it ready and put it out there. And it was very challenging, but it was also extremely rewarding because it got me on the habit of writing.
Yeah.
On a regular basis and putting these things out and making sure they were there when people expected them. And there was, people, especially the education one, got quite a bit of response because I was in the local union, and I was a leader in the union. I was a area leader and such, and so it was very I think it was a very strong start to actually getting into my writing career, was writing those blogs. So my advice would be blog, write something that you put out there, on a regular basis, stay in practice.
Yep. Laura's book came from that as well. And I think the discipline of writing is really good. I mean, Amanda, for example, on the call here, Amanda has more good book ideas than I could ever publish. And we will do more work with her. But she prolifically writes. So I'm talking about you like you're not here, Amanda, but you clearly exemplify what Mark's talking about. You just put so many fantastic ideas out to the world. So great, good stuff. All right, either the rest of you want to add something in? Oh, Harriet's trying. Okay, Harriet, you're live.
This is like becoming my my trademark is hunting frantically for how to unmute. I forget every time. I think I'm basically agreeing with everything I've heard in terms of what you need to be able to do, and you need to practice it before you're actually, before the time comes to where it really, really matters, is you need to balance the writing, the creative part, whether it be you're writing something that you hope to publish, or whether you're writing for a blog, or whether you just take do your writing all the time. I was, even in the times when I wasn't working on being a writer, I was working for a newspaper, I was doing publicity for an orchestra, all that stuff. So do your writing, but also, and this is really even more important for now, is get in the habit of and build a platform of the social media stuff. Because if you don't have a good grasp on how you work best in that platform, in building that platform, you have this book and you've got to learn all these things of what to do all at the same time, and you're just sitting there going, so I need to be on this and this, and I need to do this and that, and so have both of your pieces of foundation in place before you really even think about, you can dream about, before you even think about going on this journey, which is can be so productive, but it requires so much from you, and it's certainly not sitting in a garden eating bonbons and getting royalty checks.
Right.
To steal a
Right.
phrase.
Yeah, right. And some of what you just said, we're going to hit on the noon presentation today too. Some of that very material about developing platforms. So that's really pretty terrific. Amanda, what's your kind of off the head advice for new authors?
Mine is one that you'll hear a lot at conferences is read the genre that you're wanting to write in. Read tons of picture books, read the current ones. Yes, go back to your childhood favorites, but the publishers really want you looking at what is current, what's the writing style of that. And advice that I had kept getting, but I hadn't tried yet, just general at conferences, was take a picture book text or take another text and type it out. And so I'm trying to get this book. I'm definitely a picture book writer, but I do have this chapter book middle grade. I'm like not sure where it falls story that I absolutely love that I want to get out. So just the other night, I did go ahead and take books for the age level. It said like 2nd to 5th graders or age 8 to 12.
Yeah, right.
And I started typing out that story. And then I compared word count of their first chapter versus my first chapter. And there was quite a difference. So I'm like, okay, this is where I need work. Maybe I need more description. Maybe I need more dialogue. So it's really eye-opening when you do what we call study mentor texts.
Right. Right. Yeah. The mentor text thing is really terrific. And that's true in a lot of industries, by the way. It's not just book publishing that does that. The whole thing about learning to write copy and learning to write advertisements is the same thing. You just go back and you touch and feel and play with and, get right into somebody else's work. That's terrific. That's a terrific set of advice. Before we conclude, I want to do the pay the bills advertising thing. So let me pop that up here real quick, and then I will give our guest today an opportunity to make any final comments they'd like to make for this. A couple of things we'd like to tell you about. If you are a new author and you are intrigued by what you heard today, or you've heard anywhere in the Tucson Festival of Books this weekend and all of the 164 author conversations that have happened, terrific. We invite you to come to authortip.com and get the free checklist from us. The free checklist is Are You Ready for Publishing? And that's at authortip.com. You put your email address in there. We'll send you that little video to help you with that too if you want to watch it. It's like 5 minutes. But that will get you into our system so we can help you learn about publishing. Whether you're going to be published with us or another company, it doesn't matter. We are willing to help you to get kind of started and do some free learning about being an author. So that's the first thing. If you are already an author and then you're trying to figure out, how do I make a living at this? Or I have a great book, how come I can't make a living at it? If you're ready for the next step and the deepest levels, if you're trying to figure out what your passion capital is about, if you're trying to figure out how do you make a living at this, if you're looking for financial stability as a creative, we invite you to come into our deeper program at speaker100.com. Same thing, put your information in there. There's a 22-minute masterclass in there that you can write that will cover the four, what I call the 4 secrets, essentially, the 4 secrets to putting together what you need to do in this new world to be a creative. It's not just about writing books. It's not just about standing in front of a microphone. So that's at speaker100.com. So we encourage you to take a look at that. So if you're brand new, authortip.com. If you've been in the trenches for a while and you're going, how does this work? Speaker100.com is the place to go. And then the fun thing for the morning is we have a drawing for the t-shirts for the that were put together by the artist who also is the owner of Small Tooth Dog, which is Michelle Buvala. And this is the shirt. They come in different colors and different neck styles, but it's this terrific logo, this owl logo that we've done a couple years in a row here. And if you'd like to win one of those shirts, and there are not a ton of entries yet, so your chances are super good right now to win that contest. smalltoothdog.com/drawing. Put your name and your email address in there, and we'll draw some winners tonight. We'll draw 6 winners from the list so far. We haven't had a ton of people in there so far, so I can tell you that right now everybody's winning, but you better get in there before somebody else takes your spot. So pop in there. We'll do the drawing at 7 o'clock tonight, Arizona time. smalltoothdog.com and we'll send you a coupon to get that shirt from us for free as well. So that's where we would like to see you this evening, is to be one of the winners in that. So you spread the word around, because there's good opportunities right now. I'm just telling you, it's a good opportunity to get in there and to get your stuff, to get your opportunity to win that little shirt from the drawing. All right, so I'm just going to conclude here. I have one quick thought I'll end with, but anything else that any of you want to add to this process right now?
The basic old advice still holds true. If you're going to write,
Yeah.
write, just write. You know, you make yourself do it every day. Set yourself a goal, and achieve that goal. You know, this is a battle with yourself, but you can do it. I like to talk about how I played handball competitively for a long time, and I have severe neuropathy in my fingers. So I literally type every day until my fingers ache.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I make myself do it because it's important to me to get that writing in. So, right.
That's a great wrap up. Thank you. Yes, good. Anybody else?
Thank you for listening in on the panel and everything today. And don't give up on your journey. If you've ever seen that meme on social media where the guy is digging and he's digging and he's digging, and then he's about to stop, right? And what he was digging for, that treasure, it's just right there. And the right publisher is out there for you. And I'm so glad that the right publisher with Sean and the Small Tooth Dog Publishing Group was the right one for me.
And even if you go through spells when you do kind of give up or get distracted or whatever, you can always come back to it. I've been trying to be a writer since, as I said, trying to remember, I wrote a historical fiction book, quote unquote book, in 6th grade. And it was like historically a mess, and it was fictional a mess, but I wrote the darn thing. And then there were years, and then I got totally distracted by classical music and thought, well, you know, you can't really do both of those. And then, but I keep circling back to it. So even if it's something that you have to put on a shelf for whatever reason, it's there. If you get the urge, take it off, brush it off, and get back to it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. The last thing that I would say, and this comes from my perspective as a publisher, I'm very aware recently of authors being bullied. Authors being bullied by even people who have good intentions. So if you are putting a book out and you find one of these late night television things or something where somebody's like guaranteeing you to get your book out to the world, I want you to be very cautious of vanity publishers. Vanity publishers will not review your book. They will publish any schlock that you put out there, that they won't even edit it. If you take something to a publisher and encounter no resistance at all, and they're like, yeah, we're going to publish that, they're probably a vanity publisher. So you need to be very cautious about that. Don't let anyone front load you. In other words, force you to buy, 500 books, 1,000 books. Never let anyone force you to buy hardcover books, because they just do not sell enough to validate having that many in your garage. So be very aware of being bullied. The other side of that, though, is really well-intentioned professional groups that tell you an author never pays for publishing. Look, it's a different world now. And so if you come to us, we have many different ways to publish. And the people that are on this page right now are very traditionally published and things like that. But there's many ways to look at how the world works right now. So don't be bullied either way. Don't let somebody dump 500 hardcover books in your garage and charge you, $16,000 and go. But also be aware that there are many paths to publishing, and there are many cooperative ways to publish these days. And as an author, the purity of saying, well, money should never leave the hands of an author. I'm telling you, if you're publishing a book, you're going to have to spend some money at some point in time. And I don't care what publisher you're with. You may have to put in your own advertising time. You may have to put in, you may have to purchase your own, promotional space at something. So just be aware that don't be bullied by either side of this question. The world is very different in publishing right now, and everybody's journey is individual and unique. Don't let the vanity publishers get to you. Don't let the clubs get to you. You can do this, and you can explore getting a book out into the world, but you got to be really open to it, grow a thick skin, and stay at it every single day. So I want to thank my panel, Laura Packer, who has left a little bit early, Harriet Cole, Amanda Malek-Ahmadi. I'm looking at you on the screen, Marc Severson. Thank you all very much. I'm going to ask my staff to stick around for just a moment, my speakers. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the YouTube. Thank you all for being with us, and we hope to see you in the future. Our next call is at noon. Our next live is at noon Arizona time, 2 o'clock on the East Coast, and 11 a.m. Los Angeles. So thank you very much.